Good afternoon or good morning from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services National Conservation Training Center in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. My name is Ashley Fortune, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar series held in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey's National Climate Change and Wildlife Science Center in Reston, Virginia. The NCC-WSC Climate Change Science and Management Webinar Series highlights their sponsored science projects related to climate change impacts and adaptation and aims to increase awareness and inform participants like you about potential and predicted climate change impacts on fish and wildlife. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sean Carter, Senior Scientist. Sean, would you please introduce our speakers?
I'd be happy to, Ashley. Thank you. Today it's our pleasure to have two speakers for this presentation. The first, Dr. Carlotta Chief, is an assistant professor in the Department of Soil, Water, and Environmental Sciences at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And her research is to improve our understanding, tools, and predictions of watershed hydrology, unsaturated flow in arid environments, natural and human disturbances on soil hydrology, and climate change impacts on indigenous communities. Carlotta is Navajo from Black Mesa, Arizona, and she's received BS and MS degrees in civil and environmental engineering from Stanford, and also has her doctorate from the University of Arizona in hydrology and water resources. She's also done postdoctoral work at the Desert Research Institute in Las Vegas. Skylar Chu is a PhD student in the Department of Soil, Water, and Environmental Sciences, also at U of A. His participation in this project began in January of 2013 as a research analyst, and prior to this, Skylar collaborated on tribal environmental initiatives in his home community, the Tuscarora Nation in western New York. He obtained his master's in environmental engineering from the University of Buffalo and has a bachelor's from Dartmouth. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, I welcome today's speakers.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you everyone that is listening online. I appreciate this time to present our work related to climate change vulnerability of Native Americans in the Southwest, a case study of tribal climate adaptation among the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. We're breaking down this presentation into 6 components, and Skylar and I will share the content of this presentation. This project is an interdisciplinary project with several agencies and universities, myself included, as well as Dr. Alay Surratt-Kepdevela and Skylar Chu. We're all at the University of Arizona. And Dr. William Smith Jr., who's an environmental geographer at UNLV, Dr. David Bush, who's an ecologist at USGS, and the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, Cameron Morgan, amongst others, who are part of the environmental department at the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. The Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe is located at the terminal end of the Truckee River system, and they have a large part of their reservation that is covered by the Pyramid Lake. And this lake has quite a significant meaning to the tribe, both culturally, economically, as well as spiritually. In particular, this lake has a fish in the lake called a cui-ui, upon which the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe identify their cultural identity with. Their name in their language is translated as cui eaters. In addition, the tufa formations that are characteristics of this lake have linked to their cultural origin stories. Furthermore, they have wetlands from which they obtain reeds for their basketry, and they're very well known for their basketry skills. The lake at Pyramid Lake has been impacted by upstream users and pollution, as well as infrastructure that has been built along the river system, and has significantly impacted the lake levels since the early 1900s. As a result of these impacts, the cui has been impacted and has been listed as endangered, as well as the Lahontan cutthroat trout. Parts of the West have already warmed more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit compared to the average 20th century temperatures, and the Southwest is among the most rapidly warming region in the world. And so part of this project was to look at how the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe could adapt to climate change by focusing on looking at the vulnerabilities and thresholds and the resiliency of the system. Also, we worked with the tribe collaboratively to identify water management and adaptive strategies for the tribe. Also, our goal was to produce a framework that would be a foundation for a decision support system model that would couple a climate and biophysical and social system. And then as part of this project, this is an important project because it's one of the first projects working with tribes and looking at climate change impacts on tribes and how scientists and others in various climate centers could develop similar effective partnerships with tribes. The tasks that were involved in this project was a combination of technical as well as socio-cultural to look at how we can build collaboratively water management and adaptive strategies. So we collected quite a bit of data that included climatic and non-climatic data, as well as developed some climate change projections that came from other climate experts that were working on this through the Southwest Climate Center. And then looking at the socio-cultural, working with the tribe to collect some of that data so that we could get a holistic understanding of the vulnerabilities that the tribe had, and then work towards a collaborative adaptation strategies for the tribe. The socio-economic vulnerability looked at internal factors and external factors. And this involved quite a bit of discussion with the tribe at all levels, including the tribal president, vice president, council members, environmental professionals, and tribal citizens that also included elders and the youth. And to look at the various factors from education and employment, their perception of climate change, what the institutional capacity is, the technology that's available to them, the physical capacity, the economic resources of financial capital, social capital, and natural capital, and then also externally what support they had from the federal government, as well as their position in the Truckee River system and how their role was changing through history and to the present day, and then also their opportunity for employment and the migration off the reservation. So in this presentation, I want to just focus on a few of these factors, but much of this analysis is detailed in a publication in Climatic Change that was part of a special issue focusing on climate change on tribes across the United States. We conducted a survey with tribal members, and this survey was a statewide survey that was administered to various stakeholders in Nevada. And for the tribe, they were very aware of climate change. 80% of the people observed changes in their environment. in addition, 73% believe that climate change is happening and that humans play a role in climate change. Furthermore, 93% of the tribal members surveyed expressed their priority for climate change action at the national level. Also, we asked the tribal members who took the survey what environmental changes they observed in the environment. And from the survey, we saw that the tribe observed that they had a decrease in surface water. 72% responded saying they had observed decreases in surface water. Also, 56% of the tribal members surveyed observed a decrease in the snowpacks. So even with these tribal observations, they are in line with what scientists are also seeing in the natural environment. Also, we looked at what their belief was in climate change. And this graph shows a scale from strongly disagreeing in the red to disagree in the pink, not decided, agree, and strongly agree. And so we asked about whether if they thought climate change is happening, if climate change is naturally occurring, if human activity doesn't play a significant role and humans play a significant role, or human activity is the only factor causing climate change. So if you look and focus on the turquoise and the purple colors, you can see that there was a large percentage that did believe that climate change is happening. Also, they also saw that 73% also believe that human activity plays a significant role in climate change. Conversely, only 17% agreed or strongly agreed that human activity was the only factor in causing climate change. We developed a scientific cognitive map based on literature and expert knowledge in the field, focusing on what the impacts were on climate change for the Pyramid Lake. And this was a cognitive map that was presented to the tribe and detailing what climate change was going to cause in terms of temperature increase, droughts and floods, and the subsequent cascading impacts to the environmental impacts to the lake and to the environment, and subsequent impacts on the species. The tribe then evaluated this cognitive map, and we had a very good discussion, and the tribe developed their own cognitive map based on the expert map that really engaged the tribe to think about climate change and how it was impacting their lake and ecosystem. And so this was a very good exercise in which the cognitive map was expanded upon. We also looked at the external factor of how the tribe was positioned in terms of their power, and the power was a combination of their role, their motivation, and the resources that they had to protect their water resources. And this was a qualitative assessment over from 1900 to the present, and we saw that the tribe increased their position, their power position, over the century as a result of their ability to advocate for the protection of the Cui-ui and the Lahontan cutthroat trout, and then their ability to create partnerships and leverage federal intervention to protect the lake and the ecosystem. Also, the tribe's vulnerability to climate change is directly tied to their cultural and economic dependence on the Pyramid Lake. The external socio-economic factors influence their ability to adapt and amplify the potential impacts that the tribe faces. The sustenance of Pyramid Lake's ecosystem is extremely important for the economic, spiritual, and cultural livelihoods of the tribe. And this is reflected in the fact that the Cui-ui, the lake, and people are considered the three central components of their tribal identity. Both climatic and non-climatic impacts threaten the endangered Cui fish by decreasing the water quantity and quality. Also, the integrated framework that is developed is to create an integrative analysis that uses a model-driven, top-down, and local perception knowledge-driven, which is bottom-up, to precisely quantify the impacts and uncertainties that the tribe is facing. Despite the limited economic opportunities and dwindling federal support, the tribe's adaptive capacity is strengthened by their sustainability-based values, the technical capacity that the tribe has in natural resources management, and their proactive initiatives for invasive species control. Also, the tribe has strong external scientific networks, and they have a remarkable awareness for climate change. Like many tribes, Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe would benefit from increased federal funding for tribal climate change programs, and the tribe's resilience could be enhanced by selective, sustainable economic development that is sensitive and unique to the contents of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. In the next section, I want to discuss the next step we took from looking at the vulnerability, and that was working with the tribe in a participatory manner to discuss the impacts and the strategies for adaptation. So communication is really important for tribes, and there is a lot of time required to invest in building that trust and maintaining that communication. So we had a strong effort to do so, and we worked well with the tribe, making sure that we had a good communication. So we had a kickoff meeting, and then we presented with the tribe at various national Native American conferences to share with other tribes our success. And then we went with the tribe to attend a intertribal environmental professionals climate change workshop. And then even locally with the Nevada Water Resources Association and the Great Basin Consortium to share locally the tribe's the project and discuss their climate change impacts. And then recently we met with the tribe to do scenario discussion about the climate change scenarios that the tribe should consider. So we met with the tribe for 2 days, and the participants were tribal members as well as tribal environmental professionals, and we had about 20 participants attending, and what we discussed was the environmental, water, and ecological challenges facing Pyramid Lake, and then also to discuss management alternatives and solutions to these changes. And it's important that, this is collaborative and that we're working with the tribe in an equal fashion so that the challenges and the solutions are presented by the tribe. So from the two-day discussion, we categorized quite a bit of challenges that the tribe felt like they were facing, and this graph shows the various categories, and then also the tribal participants voted to prioritize these challenges. And at the top, the tribe felt that the sensitivity to cultural resources was the top priority, and then water quality as second, and water quality as third. Interestingly, individuals' behavior was fifth, and the tribe did feel like there was an individual responsibility to protect the lake and consider climate change impacts. So focusing on the top three, these top 7 environmental challenges, we looked at ecological indicators that the tribe should focus on in terms of looking at climate change impacts and how to be able to implement their adaptation strategies. So for water quantity, we had a list of the different indicators that the tribe should look at, lake level, snowpack, and so forth. And then water quality, looking at water temperature and dissolved oxygen, and so forth. And then finally, land cover and environmental changes and habitat loss. We listed, anything from bird count to krill count of the fish in the lake. Then we discussed the management alternatives and the solutions presented by the tribe, and education and outreach was deemed as the top priority. Tribal participants felt like there was a need to reach out within their own tribe to let others know about climate change, how it was impacting the tribe and the lake, and how they could work together to increase their adaptive capacity. Again, community organization came in second for similar reasons in terms of being able to develop adaptation strategies, and then water conservation. Some of the things that were interesting from this workshop was that many of the problems identified were non-environmental, and they were related to management, governance, and social issues. And also, educational outreach and cultural sensitivity were mentioned both as a challenge and as a solution. And so I think that's really a good lesson learned from this project that is useful for other scientists across the nation who are working with tribes, that it is critical to have that cultural sensitivity, as well as understand that there's a great need to have that educational outreach component for the tribe. Also, participants cited a need for better outreach to and collaboration with the upstream river users and the managers, considering that they are at the terminal end and are subjected to much of the impacts upstream. Pyramid Lake Tribe is definitely leading the way amongst tribes in the Great Basin and in the United States in terms of their climate change work and climate change adaptation planning. And the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe was host to the Intertribal Environmental Professionals Climate Change training that was held for tribes in the region, and DRI was also a host of that. The tribe was the lead in this workshop in terms of the hosting and giving examples of lessons learned and how other tribes could also approach climate change impacts and adaptation. But from this course, some of the main lessons were that developing an effective adaptation, it requires a buy-in and support from the tribal government and community. And that is so important because unless you have the support of the tribal government and the community level, then it's very difficult to move a plan forward or even to discuss a plan. Also, it's important to get the support of the tribal leadership, and particularly in that they pass a resolution which supports the development of the adaptation plan. So we have been presenting before the council, keeping them up to date of what we're doing, and they vote formally as to, what we're doing and what we cannot do, and developing also a formal research agreement with the tribe. Also, the tribe is the one that needs to decide what is important and it's what is relevant to them, and it is really the tribe's direction in terms of where the project goes. I will now hand it over to Skylar, who will talk about the video.
The next two sections of our presentation are going to highlight some of the outcomes of our work with the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. The first of these being a video that we created from conducting a literature review of the ecological requirements of two important fish species to Pyramid Lake, the Cui-ui and the Lahontan cutthroat trout. The YouTube link is listed here, so when this presentation is posted online, you can access the video at that time. So looking at the Cui-ui and Lahontan cutthroat trout, there's some similarities and comparisons that can be made. The Cui-ui are much more resilient than the Lahontan cutthroat trout because they live much longer, up to 40 years. They're very elusive throughout most of the year. They can only really be caught for a very small span of time during the spawning season in the spring. And they do not need to spawn annually, so that has helped with their own adaptive capacity over the thousands of years that they've been living at Pyramid Lake. In contrast, the Lahontan cutthroat trout, they only live about 6 to 8 years. They're very sensitive to temperature, and they do require annual spawning. So it is for this reason that Pyramid Lake's original native strain of Lahontan cutthroat trout actually went extinct in the 1940s due to diversions of the Truckee River by upstream users. But in the 1950s, the tribe was very proactive about reintroducing a similar strain to the lake, and they operate multiple hatcheries and fisheries to maintain stocks of Lahontan cutthroat trout in Pyramid Lake. So just looking at the temperature requirements of the fish, in this diagram, the purple dots represent the distribution of Cui-ui typically in the summer, and the orange diamonds represent where the LCT, Lahontan cutthroat trout, would be. So the Lahontan cutthroat trout, as I said, are sensitive to temperature. They prefer the region below the thermocline, which is much cooler, whereas the Cui-ui can tolerate warmer temperatures, and both of these fish are typically on the bottom of the lake surface. Cui-ui migrate to the south end of Pyramid Lake every spring, and they'll wait at the mouth of the Truckee River for these environmental cues before migrating to spawn. Gary Scopatoni has identified that these cues may include a suite of factors, including temperature, water quality, water quantity, as well as other factors. The Cui-ui, when they finally get to migrate up the Truckee River to spawn, have very specific requirements, such as temperature, stream velocity, environmental factors. One of the most important of these factors is a TDS of 600 milligrams per liter. In relation to Pyramid Lake is a saline alkaline lake. So the Truckee River water that comes down from the basin is very fresh water that allows the eggs to water harden, which is very important to the spawning and longevity of the fish. So looking at all these different factors, we came up with a number of questions. If climate change could impact the Truckee River and Pyramid Lake, what are some implications for the fish, and how might the tribe adapt to these changes? So going across the first issue, as temperatures increase, could that draw the Lahontan cutthroat trout out of their typical habitat and into deeper regions? And if so, how viable are the hatchery operations of the tribe if the lake is not able to support the trout habitat? Looking at the Cui-ui, given that they depend on these environmental cues to spawn, what happens if consecutive low flow years or an earlier snowmelt begins to interfere with these cues? And if so, are the tribe's operations for assisting the fish with their spawning through a fish elevator, are those compatible with climate changes? In addition, given that the Cui-ui eggs require fresh water to incubate, how could changes in Truckee River quality impair the survivalhood of these eggs? And should the tribe consider reevaluating their own water quality standards in order to comply, or I guess to adapt to changes in the climate? The next section will cover a hydrologic model that we developed looking at the elevation of Pyramid Lake. So basically, this is a lake water balance model that calculates the volume of Pyramid Lake at any given time based on the storage of water plus inputs due to the Truckee River flow and precipitation minus the outputs. So we developed a monthly time step and an annual time step, and the equation for the model, which we developed in Excel, is given here. So just looking at it graphically, the graph on the left shows, or the image on the left shows the volume of water that would be calculated in Pyramid Lake for this time period or this month, and that's a combination of the volume in the previous month plus the inflows of river water from Truckee River at the south end, plus the inputs of precipitation over the entire surface area of the lake, minus the evapotranspiration over the entire surface area of the lake. And our equation for evapotranspiration was the Blaney-Criddle equation, which takes into account percentage of daily sunlight as well as mean daily temperature. So when we ran our model, we compared it with the historical records, and the blue line here shows the historical records back to 1927, and the orange line is our model output. So basically what we had to do was calibrate this model because our model was showing that too much water was evaporating. So we incorporated an epsilon factor here with the evapotranspiration in order to reduce the impact of evapotranspiration, which gave us a calibrated model. Moving forward, we used this hydrologic model to create some lake elevation climate scenarios from now until the year in December 2100 in order to reflect potential changes in river flow, temperature, and precipitation. It's important to remember that these are hypothetical scenarios, which just use modified historical records of river flow. And granted, these scenarios are very hypothetical. They will become more robust with input from regional downscaled climate models. So in deciding how to change the climate for these scenarios, we looked at the Southwest Climate Change Assessment Report, which says that temperatures for the Southwest could increase from anywhere between 3 and 9 degrees Fahrenheit, and the precipitation changes for the Southwest are a little less imprecise or unpredictable, but the ranges in temperature could be anywhere from a 2-inch decrease to a 2-inch increase. So here's just a layout of the 5 different scenarios we're going to just show you briefly. The first scenario shows no change over the next 86 years. The next one is changes in river flow, temperature changes, precipitation, and then we just gave a range of extreme cases, combining all these different factors. So this is a scenario with no changes. The blue is historical trends, and the orange is the projected lake elevation. These are a range of lake elevations due to changes in river flow. So the yellow line shows a 5% increase in Truckee River flow over the next 84 years, and then the red line shows a decrease, a 5% decrease in river flow. Changes in temperature, which have a direct impact on evapotranspiration, are given here. A 2-degree decrease in temperature would also decrease evapotranspiration, so that's why the temperature decrease is linked to higher waters of higher lake elevation, and increased temperature means lower lake elevation. And then for precipitation, gradually increasing or decreasing the precipitation over the next 84 years by the year 2100 would show this range of changes in lake elevation. So a combination of these factors shows that hypothetical scenarios for lake elevation could have a huge variation based on climate factors. And we just wanted to point out here that Pyramid Lake reached its lowest lake levels in 1966. And if climate scenarios continue to worsen, could this mean that the Pyramid Lake could return to those lake levels within the next 20 years?
So from these discussions that we had with the tribe all the way from the beginning, from looking at the cognitive map and the tribe discussing and developing their own tribal cognitive map of climate change impacts, to having the discussion related to what the challenges are and proposing management solutions, to discussing the various hypothetical scenarios. Through that process, we've been able to come up with adaptation recommendations. The first one is to manage stampede reservoir releases at a convenient time for cui spawning. And currently, the tribe has been very proactive in terms of their water rights and how they've been able to define their water rights and protect their water rights. But there is opportunity for the tribe to take a closer look at how their water rights can be managed so that the cui can continue to be viable under certain scenarios from these climate change scenarios. Also, to increase irrigation efficiency, which will reduce water demand, and follow soil conservation practices, which will improve water quality. The tribe does have agricultural areas, and that agriculture is one of the livelihoods of the tribe. Third is to revisit operations at Marble Bluff Dam to adapt to changes in the hydrologic regime of the river. The Marble Bluff Dam is critical to the tribe's operation to allow the cui to move upstream using a fish ladder to support their spawning. And so the recommendation is to have the tribe relook at the operations at the dam in these low flow scenarios. Also, similarly, to revisit the hatchery operations to adapt to changes in the fish population. The tribe currently has 4 hatcheries and to support the cui and the Lahontan cutthroat trout. Fifth is to maintain and enhance efforts to restore the natural riparian habitat of the Truckee River. And again, this is directly linked to the tribe's cultural resources in terms of their activities related to the reeds and obtaining the ecosystem services of the riparian habitat. So it's important for the tribe to maintain and restore that habitat. Also, adapt urban planning and residential outdoor landscaping to promote water harvesting of storm runoff, reduce erosion, enhance water quality, and water for community gardens. And that's addressing more at the local level. Seventh is to integrate a comprehensive emergency response plan for mitigation of chemical pollution and sediment pollution upstream. And the tribe does have different types of emergency plan, such as one for flood, but there is a need to bring all those different emergency plans together so that they are seen, holistically and integrated way to address upstream pollution and sediment pollution from upstream users. Also, as we have looked at the environmental indicators, we recommend to the tribe that they monitor the environmental indicators so that they can establish a baseline and also begin to adapt and to prepare for climate change impacts. 9 is outreach. The tribe is very concerned about letting others know about climate change, how it's going to impact their tribe and their lake, and the Cui-ui, which is their identity and their culture, so that the youth can participate in that discussion and be able to discuss as a community what the tribe is facing. Also, to establish tribal-led reservation-wide initiatives to increase education of global change and protecting the environment, particularly bridging from high school level to senior centers. And those adaptation recommendations are a result of the discussion and those that have been presented to by the tribe collaboratively with us. So I want to thank the funding from the Southwest Climate Science Center. This project would have not been possible if we did not have the funding. And I'm very honored, we are very honored to have worked with Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. They have been very engaging and supportive, and I think that was key to the success of the project and being able to get some very good outcomes from the project. For more information, we do have a website called nativeadaptation.arizona.edu, and as well as a Facebook link. And in terms of the effective tribal collaboration, those results are pending, and that is led by, in part by Allison Meadows. And so we look forward to her results in terms of how we as scientists can continue and start to work with tribes related to addressing climate change impacts and developing adaptation strategies. My contact info is here if you want to ask any more questions beyond this webinar. And with that, I thank everyone here on the webinar for allowing us to present, and I also want to thank my collaborators at all the partnering institutions that we worked with. And I would like to answer any questions that the attendees might have at this time.
Excellent. Thank you, Carletta and Skylar. One did just come up from Jim Siegel, and he says, As Reno grows and Tahoe experiences climate change, what does this mean for the Truckee River flows in the lake?
Well, the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe and the other upstream river users have been collaborating for many decades now, and there's been a lot of productive collaboration on how to effectively manage the river flows for various uses for fish spawning, but also as well as for growing populations and for other uses. So that is currently, I guess, managed by the Truckee River Operating Agreement. We've been working with the tribe on understanding the TROA, but that is up to the tribe to, I guess, move forward with. So a big part of our research wasn't really to look at the water rights, but kind of understand how the tribe has negotiated and come into a more has used their negotiations through these agreements to be more proactive and able to increase their adaptive capacity through collaboration with other upstream river users.
Sean, did you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you very much for the presentation. It was really interesting, and I really appreciate it. I think it really captures very well what we're trying to do in that part of the world. And thank you very much for the speakers.